Hey guys, it's Sam. I'm still recovering from a little bit of a cold, but Vlogmas is right around the corner. I'm only doing 12 days of Vlogmas this year, just because of like time commitments and stuff, and the videos I want to film, I only really want to do 12 instead of like the full month. But last year I think was the only year that I ever did the full month. Anyway, Vlogmas is coming, and I gotta pre-film some stuff. So even though I'm still feeling a little grungy, we're gonna have to deal with that. But today I'm doing my November wrap-up. Is it still pretty late in the month to be doing this? Yes. But I'm getting better than what I just did, which was like my October wrap-up very recently. So let's get into it, okay? The first book I read in November was The Library of the Dead by T.L. Hucho. This was a book that I tried to read physically, and then I just could not get behind like the cadence of like the narrative voice. So I was like, you know what, this is probably be better on audio, and it was. This is the first book in the Edinburgh Night series, which is like an urban fantasy series. It follows a character who can talk to ghosts, and she is a black girl. I think she's like 14 or 15, maybe younger in this one. But she can talk to ghosts, her family can talk to ghosts, and people know about this, and you can get like communication from ghosts and whatever. And then there's also people who are like higher up on the paranormal chain that can also like talk to ghosts and stuff. But she does this as a way and for her whole family to make money, and she starts hearing from the local ghosts that like someone is stealing the children, and gets kind of like wrapped into this. This was really hard for me to like get wrapped into and to like pay attention to, and I don't exactly know why that is. This is an adult book, even though it has a like young adult kind of protagonist, child protagonist. It's very much an adult book, but there's just something about, again, either like the cadence of the narrative voice that just didn't like resonate for me necessarily. And this like had vibes of like a grittier, sort of, because it's about like sort of like some of the criminal underbelly stuff, like Philip Pullman, his Dark Materials. Like if you took some of those characters, set them in Scotland, made it spookier, that was kind of the vibes of this. But I found myself even in the audio like not necessarily caring a ton, and just couldn't get super attached to anything, the plot, the narrative voice, any of that. So this was fine. It was like a solid 3 stars, but I decided to just not continue with the series. It wasn't really like compelling enough for me. But if something like, you know, talking to ghosts sounds kind of cool, you're into urban fantasy typically, I'd still try this out. Just wasn't for me, which I wasn't expecting because I tend to really like urban fantasy. I then read Monstrous Volume 6 by Marjorie Liu and Sana Takeda. This is a long-running graphic novel series that, well, it's comics, but they turn them into, obviously, these. And it's a lot. It's like a horror fantasy. It's fantasy with some horror elements. There's old gods, there's eldritch kind of beings, there's more fantastical creatures, there's like a shadow cult of witches who are doing really bad things. There's a ton of body horror, war, eugenics-y type things in this like fantasy setting. It's a lot. Anyway, watch some of Hess reviews for this if you're interested in more information. But this volume, so much payoff. So much happens in this volume that we've been just like waiting for, and we get a lot of like the character arcs in this series are really good, and we're getting a lot of like payoff from that, particularly from our main character. Trauma everywhere. Very gay, very sapphic. Sapphic love, sapphic betrayal. I don't know. A lot. A lot of political machinations. So yeah, this is like, I wouldn't say this is closing out an arc or anything, but we're finally getting some like answers to some things that have been just like breadcrumbed along for quite some time. So this was very badass. I loved it. This one was 5 out of 5 stars. Then I read For the Wolf by Hannah Witten. The crime that it is that I had not read this sooner, which I know. I was waiting for winter though. I was. The tagline for this is that the first daughter is for the throne, the second daughter is for the wolf. So in this small kingdom, whenever there are girls born in this like particular bloodline, their first daughter is always going to be like the next reigning heir. The second daughter is basically sacrificed to the wolf. People don't exactly know who that is. It sounds a little bit like Uprooted, right? Kind of similar vibes. So our main character, Red, ends up getting sacrificed to the wolf. And he lives in this like sentient forest, and the forest is very bad, and there's like things that come out of the forest and whatever. And she has, before she even gets there, this like connection to the woods that we're not really sure about what exactly happened, and then she meets him. It's a man, it's not a wolf, and you figure out more about like the forest and the bad things happening in the forest and whatever. Also, we do get chapters from her sister, the first daughter, and what's going on back home, and there's this like nefarious plot also happening there. So we get a little bit of both. I really enjoyed this. It wasn't without fault. There were some things about like some of the pacing and stuff that wasn't like perfect for me, but this was also set up to be very much my jam. There are triggers in here for self-harm, particularly around the magic, blood, possession, body horror, and death of family. But we have a sentient woods. We have evil things coming out of the sentient woods. We have like they're not enemies, but like in a similar vein to Uprooted, which was one of my favorite books of all time. We have her discovering more about what's going on in the woods and the man in the woods and blah, 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 blah. So I dug it. I dug the little romance going on here. It's not a romantasy, but it has some like little romance elements in here. There's also some stuff happening with the sister. So the second book in the duology is more about the sister, I think. So there's that. That is very compelling. I think with the splitting of the two sort of narratives, there was a little bit of like, I don't know, like I feel like it was pulling away from some things, and some things were like a little bit too easily wrapped up, but like even the way this ends was just like perfect for me. So yeah, 4 to 4.5 stars on this. It's a book that's for me specifically, you know? So I really dug that, and I knew that I would. I also attempted to read The Daughter of the Moon Goddess by Sue Lin Tan. So many people have talked about either really loving this or DNFing it, and I was one of the people that DNF'd it. I DNF'd it like, I think like halfway through. I started reading it physically, and then I was like, you know what, let's try the audiobook. Listen to the audiobook, and it was just kind of bored. Like, it was pretty slow. I didn't find the characters particularly compelling. It didn't feel like anything new and different. And like even the political machination stuff was just kind of boring. Like I've already forgotten like basically everything. And like, yeah, it just felt like something I'd sort of read before. And even though this cover is like beautiful and stunning and like it had a lot of potential as a fantasy story, just did not grip me. And the last book that I read this month was Hench by Natalie Zena Walscotts, and this is the first book. Well, there's supposed to be another book, but it's been pushed back like a lot. But this is basically following a main character in this world. There are just superheroes, supervillains, you know, sort of that kind of like Marvel-esque society, and they're just normal. And so she works for a temp agency where she works for supervillains. And she gets pulled into a plot with a supervillain and a little bit closer to the heroes and starts discovering things about the heroes that are like, maybe they're not as heroic as they seem. And she kind of makes it a personal vendetta against them a little bit. So there's a little bit of this like element of what makes a villain, what makes the hero, you know, some of those discussions of things. What would be the impact of a society in which superheroes and supervillains are fighting all the time and like the collateral damage? It's kind of the discussion of that. There are triggers in here for body horror. I think that's the major stuff. Like there's definitely just like superhero type violence. This was our House Alt Book Club pick for last month. So we did do a live show on this where we talk more in depth about it. So I'll link that on the screen. But this like I solidly enjoyed. I listened to the audiobook and there were parts of it that I like didn't love as much. The audiobook was like very, I don't want to say overacted, but like a little bit of that sometimes. And there were parts of this that kind of dragged, but overall I did enjoy like the theme exploration, and if the next book comes out soon-ish, I'll probably continue with it because I'm just like a little intrigued. But I don't necessarily love the superhero genre enough in like book form to like be super compelled by it. But I like what it was saying and what it was doing, and it was like fun. So solid 3 stars. Binksy is right here. Yes. I know, you're such a good boy. So that's it for the books that I read in November. I will say that I did read like 70% of The Ship of Magic by Robin Hobb in November. I wanted to include that in my wrap up, but I couldn't finish it in time. It's like a 900-page book. But I will say that like if this seems a little short, yes, because the equivalent of like 3 books I was reading in 1 book at the end of the month. So comment below, let me know what you thought of any of these books if you've read them and how your November reading month went. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see all of you guys soon. Bye.